What if it's just a whole lot more of the same for LSU football this upcoming season?
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, y'all? Welcome into Locked On LSU. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. That also includes YouTube. So if you listen on your preferred podcast platform, first and foremost, thanks for listening and thanks for making us your first listen every single day. But you can also watch the podcast. So subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow us on your preferred podcast platform, rate, review, comment, like all that great stuff. Always appreciate you guys for being here and also appreciate our everydayers. Thanks for coming back and appreciate you for making us your first listen every single day. All right, let's get into it because today is Wednesday. So that means it is a mailbag Wednesday. Just a reminder, if you have a comment, question, concern, just something you want me to touch on next week's mailbag, feel free to send those questions, comments, and concerns in below on the YouTube page. You can send them in on Twitter as well. My Twitter at CarolineFenton1. You can tweet them to me. You can DM them to me. However you want to get those questions in, feel free to send those in for next week's mailbag. I try to just pick out what I think are the most thought-provoking questions, and I try to get to as many as I possibly can. But I thought this one was a fair question that we'll probably break down throughout the rest of the offseason and heading into this season as well. And that's the question of, what if LSU goes 9-3 in the regular season again? You know, we talk about back-to-back 10-win seasons for Brian Kelly, and that's the truth. LSU has won 10 games the past two seasons, but that 10th win came in a bowl game. 9-3 in the regular season. And I think that we can all agree that 9-3 versus 10-2 in the regular season are two very different things, especially as we get into the 12-team playoff. Because if you go 10-2 in the regular season in the SEC, you're probably a playoff team, right? I mean, even with LSU at 9-3, right on the regular season this past year, they were right on the outside looking at, I believe, the final rankings pre-poll game. I think it had LSU at 14. So that would have had LSU right on the outside looking in had they picked up that 10th win in the regular season. Maybe it came against Ole Miss or Alabama. Well, that would put them right into the top 12. That would make LSU in this 12-team playoff a playoff team. So let's be real here. 9-3 and 10-2, two very different things. And I'm not scoffing at two back-to-back 10-win seasons of Brian Kelly's first 2 years, but I think an important thing to point out. If LSU goes 9-3 again, you're getting into really complicated, muddy waters, I believe, because they also believe that not all 9-3s are created equal, right? That in Brian Kelly's first season, 9-3, that's a very different vibe than 2023. Because in 2022, you didn't have the number one offense in the country, but you also didn't have a statistically horrendous defense. So very different paths, but exact same results. If you get the same results in year 3 as you got in year 1 and year 2, I think it's totally and completely fair and justified to be frustrated. Because Brian Kelly came to LSU to win national championships. Brian Kelly came to LSU to be a national championship contender, get to Atlanta on a consistent basis. And if you go 9-3 again, I know you went 9-3 in year 1 and that was good enough to get you to Atlanta. I don't think that 9-3 in the regular season again is going to still be enough to get you to Atlanta, especially when divisions are going away. In 2022, had divisions not been a thing, like it will not be a thing moving forward, you wouldn't have made it to Atlanta. You see what I mean? But Tennessee had a better final record in the regular season in 2022 than LSU did, but LSU won the SEC West, beating Ole Miss and Alabama. So if LSU goes 9-3 again, I'm going to be honest with y'all. I think that you should feel justified in feeling this way, and I'm telling you, this is how I will feel. Of course, like I said, not all 9-3s are created equal, but I would be frustrated because after in year 3, you want to start to see ascension. Because that's exactly what Brian Kelly told all of us was, look, years 1 and 2, while we're really proud of what we accomplished, in year 1 and year 2, our prerogative, our objective was to build a foundation to becoming a national championship contender. He said, I feel like we've built that we've established a culture in the locker room, that the team knows the expectations, that we know who we want to be and how we want to get there. So now we're ready to ascend. Well, I think that you should be ready to ascend in year 3. And it might not be very fair, right? Because I was talking to one of my co-hosts here in Nashville who's a Vanderbilt fan, went to Vanderbilt. I said, "Do you mean to tell me that you'd be upset with 9-3?" Yeah, because the expectations at Vanderbilt are not the same at LSU. That look, going 9-3, maybe coming off of the 2021 season when you had a completely decimated roster, that is a resounding success. But the expectations raise. The expectations get higher because this is LSU. You don't want to just, beat the teams you should beat and get beat by the teams that you shouldn't. Especially now, when it feels like there's a window to beating some teams that might not be open. That window might not always be open. I look at Alabama. I think that's the perfect example. Under Kalen DeBoer, I don't think that Alabama is just going to fall into being a pedestrian team. Kalen DeBoer has won every single place where he has gone. I expect Alabama to be national title contenders at some point. In year 1 under Kalen DeBoer, maybe not, even with Jalen Milroe coming back. Because year 1 under a new head coach in a new system with 2 new coordinators and trying to replace all of the players that entered the transfer portal after Nick Saban retired, I think there's a little bit of vulnerability there for Alabama in year 1. Vulnerability that I don't expect every single year. You got Vanderbilt on your schedule. That's a nice little gimme. South Carolina has a new quarterback and wasn't very good last year, even with who I think was a pretty solid quarterback in Spencer Rattler. You have both of those teams on your schedule. This seems like an opportunity to at least show growth. It seems like an opportunity to win 10 games this season. I know it's a lot easier said than done. But if LSU goes 9-3 again, whether it's fair or not, we're going to start asking if Brian Kelly is the guy to win a national championship at LSU. Can he be the 4th consecutive head coach to win a national championship at LSU? We're going to start questioning that. Is that fair? No, it's not, because it's only year 3 on the job in a 10-year contract. Is college football fair? No, it's not. The shelf life of a college football coach is about the shelf life of an avocado, okay? If you don't see results, questions start to raise. And if you don't see results for a long enough time, you're going to get fired. Now, I'm not saying that Brian Kelly is getting fired after year 3. I'm not saying that Brian Kelly is or should be on the hot seat. But if you have 3 consecutive years of about the same thing, of the same results, different paths, but same results, aren't you going to grow impatient? Aren't you going to question, well, if not this year, then when? If not now, then when? There will be questions raised about Brian Kelly and his ability to get it done at LSU and in the SEC. Honestly, I think those questions are kind of happening now, especially after the comments that Brian Kelly made with Jacques Doucet of WAFB about, quote unquote, we're not in the business of buying players. I think now those questions already exist. So I don't need LSU to win a national championship this season. In fact, I don't think LSU will win a national championship this season. But yet another year of 9-3, which is nothing to scoff at. Because I'll take 9-3 over 8-4, 7-5 any day. Especially in this league. It's only getting more difficult with Texas and Oklahoma joining the mix. Oklahoma, another one that could be potentially vulnerable this year, but I don't expect Oklahoma to be a 7-5 and 8-4 program for the next 5 to 10 years. You need to start seeing some progress. And it's not just individual progress or progress on the field. You need to start seeing progress in the win and loss column. Because again, shelf life ain't very long. Questions start coming up a lot sooner rather than later, and especially a lot sooner than they used to. You had a lot of money invested in here. When there's a lot of money invested, patience starts to run thin. More of your questions coming up next. Plus, I want to address a comment about the defense. We'll get into that coming up next after just a few words from our sponsors. Passion, drive, and patience. That's the formula for winning championships, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. So, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every single time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts that you need at the prices that you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Rolling along here, Locked On LSU. Thanks again for making us your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Do you have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Rolling along here, Locked On LSU. Going to continue to get into your comments, questions, concerns, and one that I wanted to address. It was a comment, and again, whenever I address comments, it's never me, picking on anyone. It's never me trying to make fun of anyone on this platform. It's simply just conversations that I might see happening. Whether it's myself and a listener and a DM, or if it's a comment, it's just things that I think are worthy of bringing to this space to discuss so we all can discuss. So this comment is from Cole on a podcast earlier this week in which I talked about I'm not taking LSU to win a national championship because I don't think their defense is going to be good enough. And I know that this is the time of year what I like to call everything's going to be fine season because you don't have anything to base your predictions off of really other than just speculation or research or talk and pure sheer and utter hope. Because I always say, okay, today on May 15th, it's really easy to say everything is going to be fine. LSU's missed out in the transfer portal on defensive tackle, and they don't really have anyone to fill in that space that you feel great about, but everything is going to be fine. You're relying on some young and rather inexperienced corners or transfer portal corners to be the backbone of your secondary, but everything's going to be fine. It's easy to say that everything is going to be fine on May 15th. But once we get to September, October, and November, when you're going through the grind of what LSU schedule is, when you're going through the grind of an SEC schedule, and oh yeah, by the way, you have to go on the road at Texas A&M, you don't really know if everything is going to be fine or not. It's not as easy to say that everything is going to be fine. So that's what I just try to do here. Try to be realistic. But to the comment, Cole says, this defense will be much better because of coaching in the top 40 defenses. If LSU offense can control clock and avoid turnovers, we will make the playoffs. All bets are off past that. Now, I would agree. If the LSU offense can control the clock and avoid turnovers, that's going to put you in a pretty good position because anytime your offense can control the clock, score points, and not turn the ball over, you feel like you're in a pretty good position. But again, my questions and concerns, or maybe questions, I have plenty of questions. Concerns is the right answer. The root of my concerns about this team are not offensively motivated. Now, maybe they should be. Maybe I'm just a total bobo. The root of my concerns are defense. And Cole says this defense will be much better because of coaching in the top 40 defenses. How can you say that? How can you say that this defense is going to go from 125th to 40th based off of coaching? Now, again, I feel great about this coaching staff. I think this is an all-star coaching staff. I think Brian Kelly deserves a massive round of applause for the money that he was able to get to pay these coaches and to get those coaches into Baton Rouge, to get those coaches coaching these football team. Kevin Peebles, Bo Davis, Blake Baker, all coaches, not just with ties to the school or to the state, but also coaches with a proven track record of doing what we all want this LSU defense to do and to be. But coaches also need to coach talent. Coaches cannot just wait, and I don't care how great of a coach you are. I don't care if it's Nick Saban. Coaches can't just wave a magic wand and make a player who's either not ready or maybe just not good enough, and ready, and game changers and difference makers in the most competitive and difficult league in all of college football. They can't just snap their fingers and make Dominic McKinley, a true freshman, a game wrecker in the SEC. Can't do that. Because although I think Dominic McKinley is a fantastic talent that's going to be great for this team moving forward, can Bo Davis, even as the best defensive line coach in all of in all of college football, can he just all of a sudden make him ready? Can he just all of a sudden prepare Dominic McKinley to take on Alabama, Ole Miss, and USC week 1 without actually having the ability to recreate gameplay in practice? Because we all know you can put the pads on in practice and you can pop the pads in practice. Ain't no practice gonna prepare you for a college football game, especially when that comes against USC. I know, I don't think USC is a national title contender, but still, it's not like there are any, Scarbinis or jabronis out there. Can Bo Davis all of a sudden just wave his magic wand and turn, Kimo Makaneole, who was playing offensive line last year, a starting defensive tackle in the SEC? Maybe. Maybe. But I'm not going to make that my expectation because I don't think that's fair. I think what's fair to ask is that this coaching staff gets every single one of those players to their ceiling, coaches them up to the best that they can possibly be. Now, that's not magic. That's not waving a magic wand and snapping your fingers. That's coaching. But the question lies in what is that ceiling? And is that ceiling good enough? Is that ceiling for each of these individuals on defense that we have a lot of questions about? Is that good enough to make your defense good enough to make you a national title contender? I don't know. And I'm not saying that Cole is wrong in saying that LSU could be a top 40 defense. Sure, anything's possible. Absolutely. I'm not going to write that off. But would I put my money on it? Would I bet that LSU this upcoming season, with all of the questions that they have at corner, with all of the questions that they have at defensive tackle, with all of the questions that we have about Harold Perkins and his ability to be an impact player at inside linebacker, would I put my money on LSU being a top 40 defense? Frankly, I don't know if I could. Maybe that's me being a pessimist. Maybe you would be willing to, and that is totally fine. But today, on May 15th, I can't get into everything's going to be fine season, at least as far as the defense is concerned. Maybe I'm wrong. I just don't see that. And I don't see that happening just based off of the coaching staff alone. Now, would LSU have been a top 40 defense last year with Mason Smith, Mekhi Wingo, and Harold Perkins being in the correct spot? I can get on board with that. But Mason Smith and Mekhi Wingo aren't coming back. And I still have questions about Harold Perkins. Final question coming up next on the other side. And this is an interesting one and one that there is no right answer to. It's total and complete opinion and speculation. So we'll get into that coming up next after just a couple of words from our sponsors. Okay, I want to tell you about Game Time. So, Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip off. There's killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. And you could buy any tickets with Game Time, whether that's a game, a play or musical, a comedy show, a concert, whatever it might be, Game Time has it all. And I will be completely honest with you. This is not just, the ad speaking. Game Time is the first place that I go when I buy tickets. In fact, I was looking to buy a gift for a loved one, and I cannot give more detail than that because they might be listening right now. But I was buying a gift for a loved one going to a game. And the first place I went was Game Time. And I got great prices, and I got to see a 360-degree view of exactly where we were going to be sitting. So I knew, okay, there's not a pole in front of me, there's not an obstructed view. And I'm so excited to gift those tickets very soon, in just about a month. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege. That's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, thanks again for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. Final question on this week's Mailbag Wednesday. This is an interesting question that we will also continue to get to throughout the rest of the off season as we lead into the regular season. But this is one that has no right answer, and I want to get your opinions on this. This is just my opinion, but I want your opinion. So feel free to comment down below or send in your thoughts on Twitter. But this question is, what do you think is going to be the toughest game for LSU this upcoming season? Great question. Quickly, before I answer that, let's run through the schedule. As we know, week 1, LSU playing USC in Vegas on Labor Day weekend on that Sunday. Week 2, at home, taking on Nichols. Not going to be the toughest one on their schedule. Week 3, on the road at South Carolina. Again, like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, South Carolina, and then moving on after Spencer Rattler. The offensive line was horrendous last season. Juice Wells, their number one receiver last year before he got hurt, he transferred to Ole Miss. Xavier Legette, the guy who stepped up when Juice Wells went down, well, Xavier Legette declared for the NFL draft, and he's now with the Carolina Panthers. So there's just a lot of change with the South Carolina team. I don't think that one is going to be the toughest game on LSU schedule, even though Williams-Brice, not an easy place to play. I think it depends when is that game going to be played. 11 a.m. kick versus 6:30 kick at Willie B, very different. At home against UCLA, not one that terrifies you. It's not a cupcake by any means, but it doesn't terrify you. Another game at home against South Alabama. Again, not on my list of contenders for the most difficult game on the schedule. Now, here is where the magic happens. This is the juicy little bit of LSU's schedule. October 12th, LSU hosting Ole Miss. That is going on my list of potentially what could be LSU's most difficult game. Now, you get the benefit of getting Ole Miss at home. Obviously, on the road at Vaught Hemingway last year, 700 yards given up to Ole Miss this past season. But what Lane Kiffin has done in the transfer portal this past season is really scary, frankly, is very, very scary. Now, again, I'll reiterate that just because you bring in all of this talent in the transfer portal doesn't mean that it's all going to come to fruition, because you also have to come together and build a cohesive unit. You also have to all come together and make sure all of your pieces, parts all fit together. And in the transfer portal, you're bringing in a ton of players that have different backgrounds, different philosophies, maybe different styles of playing, different offenses, different defenses. So it's not easy to just bring in all of these pieces and make this puzzle fit. But I think the wild card there is Jackson Dart. That Jackson Dart returns for his third season at Ole Miss. He knows the offense. Lane Kiffin knows him, knows the plays to call to help him. We know this Ole Miss team is going to be able to put up points. The question has always been the defense. Well, Ole Miss has brought in some dogs on defense. Brought in Walter Nolan, the top defensive transfer coming in from Texas A&M, bringing in Princely Mamielin from Florida. Like, I think Ole Miss can be a really good team. Now, I'm going to have to see it before I truly believe that Ole Miss is a title contender, because let's be honest, the biggest game that Lane Kiffin has won in his tenure at Ole Miss was at home against LSU. and it took 700 passing yards, not passing yards, excuse me, 700 total yards surrendered from that piss poor LSU defense this past year to do it and to win by a touchdown. So I'm going to have to see Lane Kiffin win some big games and win some big games on the road for me to say they're true title contenders. But it's a stacked roster. It's a good team. We know they're well coached. That's going on my list of potentially most tough games. On the road at Arkansas, Arkansas is dealing with life post KJ Jefferson. Arkansas is bringing in the Bobby Petrino offense. So that's an experiment that I'm really intrigued to see kind of shake out. But what we know about this LSU Arkansas matchup is it's never easy. How many years has it been the winner or the game has been decided by a field goal? It's been like what, 4 or 5 years? Last year, we know it was way too close for comfort. The year before, and it took kind of a shootout between Jaden Daniels and KJ Jefferson. The year before in Fayetteville, the Harold Perkins game, what was the final score? Like 13-10 points were tough to come by. That was a very closely contested game. So like these these Arkansas games, they haven't been easy, but I'm not going to say it's going to be one of LSU's toughest just because there is so much turnover on this Arkansas team. One that you might not be thinking about just because they don't feel as scary this offseason as maybe off seasons past, but it's Texas A&M. You play at Kyle Field. Don't look now, but every single game that LSU and Texas A&M have played since Texas A&M has joined the SEC, the home team has won. So, I mean, like even in 2022, when LSU was playing for everything, a potential bid to the college football playoff, and LSU was the better team. At that point, Texas A&M had won 4 games. They were playing for nothing. They weren't bowl eligible. That was their bowl game, and you couldn't find a way to win. Kyle Field's not an easy place to play. No, neither is Tiger Stadium. But that game scares me. I know there's a lot of newness. Obviously, Jimbo was fired in the middle of last season. They bring in Mike Elko. But a couple of things with Texas A&M that scares me that we're not talking about enough. Connor Wigman is coming back healthy. Connor Wigman was an ankle against Auburn early last season. So last year, we were playing against A&M's third string quarterback because Wigman got hurt, Max Johnson got hurt. We're playing against a guy who never started an SEC game in his life. That's not going to be the case this year, at least for now. I never want to hope for injuries for anybody, ever. But Connor Wigman is coming back. And by the time that you play Texas A&M on October 26th, they're going to know who they are. They're going to know how to win football games. If you were playing Texas A&M on September 21st, that might be a different story. But with all of the changes, offensive play caller and head coach, by October 26th, you think that they're probably going to have their stuff figured out by then. So that one I'm going to write in. And then obviously Alabama. Alabama is on the list of the toughest games on LSU's schedule. Similar reasons of Texas A&M. I know Kalen DeBoer is coming in. I know you're learning a new offense. I know that everything is different and everything has changed. I know that you lost a lot of your game changers and playmakers last season when Nick Saban announced his retirement, but you're still returning Jalen Milroe, and this is still an incredibly talented roster. I don't expect this Alabama team, just because Nick Saban isn't coaching it, to all of a sudden be a 6-6 or 7-5 team. They still have a ton of talent. Now, you don't get the same Nick Saban benefit of the doubt. You don't. There are, I know, as I said earlier, there is a certain level of vulnerability that I think Alabama has that they might not have long term, just because it is a new head coach. But let's not forget, in year 1 of Brian Kelly, new head coach, he beat Alabama. So you never know what can happen. So looking through the rest of LSU's schedule, Florida, you're at the Swamp. But also by November 16th, I mean, that Florida team is going to be gassed. They have a gauntlet of a schedule. Billy Napier might not even be the coach at that point. So while I don't love going to the Swamp, I can't be overly scared of Florida this year. You host Vanderbilt, and then you host Oklahoma to round out the season. It's a tough game to finish up on the season, but I'm going to say of the toughest game on LSU schedule in contention for me, it's Ole Miss, A&M, and Alabama. But we will absolutely get more into that. And it was a great question. But that's going to do it for me today. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. Coming up in tomorrow's edition of Locked On LSU, transfer portal targets, and especially portal targets at the most important position that we've been talking about for the last few weeks. We'll get into that on tomorrow's edition of Locked On LSU.